and basically applying transdisciplinarity on them. So, I mean, I've been preaching to the choir, but it's very important from the beginning to tell our students that the silos do not exist. There are no verticals. What you need to do is immediately erase these boundaries, and we teach them from the first day. And one method that we teach them comes from a French guy called Sébastien Marteau, and he basically showed how if you ask someone to work with the latest technology, and here's just a list of trends in tech that are, you know, all clients are asking for, the market's looking for it, universities are researching, all the different fields that are there. If you ask someone to innovate, because that's how, you know, how it is driven today, if you innovate in any of these fields, it's not going to work. The minute you combine two, it's immediately possible. You see possibilities. So if I ask you to innovate in additive fabrication, it's just too vast. But if I ask you to hybridize additive fabrication and smart spaces, it's possible to think about a 3D printed smart office or smart environment. The same thing with AI embedded devices, additive fabrication AI, et cetera, et cetera. So by combining things, we show our students that immediately windows open. So this is the power of crossing across boundaries, whether within the same field or not. So this hits home with the students. They totally then understand, oh, okay, we need to actually be crossing the boundaries and going into the field. And that's why we call ourselves Dubai Institute of Design and Innovation. And we built the program with MIT and with Parsons, very advanced schools in terms of innovation and design. And basically, design and innovation is our DNA. This is how we think of it. Our DNA is basically built on 3 different proficiencies or literacies or fluencies: the visual, the tech, and the strategic, which I mentioned before. And within each course, within each course, we have 4 different things that we need to cover: how to think critically and conceptualize ideas, how to communicate these complex ideas in meaningful, purposeful ways, how to prototype them and make them. So we have a very strong fabrication culture, a maker culture, and the key thing is the ethical dimension. Why are we doing this? Why is this important to do? We offer 4 disciplines: product, multimedia, fashion, and strategy. Now, this is not transdisciplinary in any way or shape or form, but we had to start somewhere. And in fact, when we actually mapped them onto what we think are future jobs in design, we discovered that if our students graduate with one discipline, they are ill-equipped to actually work in future jobs. They will be out of work immediately. They'll be replaced or overlooked, which is even worse. So that's why after the first year of foundation studies, our students have to combine 2 of our disciplines together. So 2 design disciplines together. So let's say product, multimedia, fashion and strategy, multimedia and strategy. And what this generates are 6 different pathways. And what's amazing is that once we start looking at what these skills, these hybrid skills produce, they prepare them for their future jobs, which are listed here. I'll just give you some examples. So if you combine product and multimedia, they can immediately apply their skills in designing Internet of Things furniture. The same thing with product and fashion, they can go into wearables immediately. You don't have to learn on the job. Multimedia and fashion, interactive clothing, multimedia and strategy, blockchain interaction. And these are just examples of, one example from each combination. Fashion and strategy, ethical fashion. This is a big topic we have in our school, with a focus on thinking of ethical practices, but also thinking of creating new materials without killing animals. And chief design officer, for instance. In conclusion, what I'd like to show you is the first fruit of this. This is a student in her 2nd year. Her name is Maha. And this is working in quarantine, but she did amazing work. She's a student who has combined fashion and product design. So in the fall, she did courses in product design. She learned all the techniques or basic techniques of product design. And now she imagined her going into the fashion design program. And she is looking into an ethical dimension, which is body shaming, fashion and body shaming. And so she did a lot of research on that. But that's not what I want to focus on. What I want to focus is that she developed a new fabric using upcycled denim, like jeans material, denim, upcycled. And based on her product design skills, she was actually able, if you look here in the corner, she was able to develop a system of creating or weaving a denim in a way without using any thread, but using laser cutting of old denim and actually weaving it together using product design techniques that she learned. And for her, it was completely natural. It was completely without much effort. She's a super talented student for sure. At the same time, for her to bridge between those two disciplines and come up immediately in her second year in college to come up with a new system of creating a fabric, we think is incredible. And we think this is just the beginning of what is possible in such a curriculum. And again, this is our first fruit of this. There were other students, but I wanted to show you this. Carlos will show you other students' work, but I wanted to highlight this one. So we believe that with this approach, they will learn to weave together design and life skills to be able to solve the wicked problems. We're very optimistic, as you can see. At the same time, what the students have produced in the short time that we've had is giving us hope that transdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary, please tell us what it is that we're doing. But basically for them to break from the boundaries, they're able to innovate naturally as if they are drinking water. So I give the floor to my colleague, Carlos. I hope you got an idea of how we are approaching this. And please, Carlos, all yours. I will stop sharing.
Okay, thank you, Hani. And can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so following on Hani's discussion around the curriculum, I'll explain or showcase very briefly some of the projects that we develop with our students and how we try to teach design towards transdisciplinarity. So of course, as a design school, we teach drawing, but not drawing just as a representation, but really drawing as a means of thinking. In this case, it's about visual analysis, and some of these drawings are really analysis of systems and analysis of relationships. And this is the basis for what we call rule-based design or generative design. And this is, again, the basis to design with the computer by just inputting some instructions and then allowing the computer to generate different designs. Of course, we do a lot of model making and work with the hands. We think through making and doing, and we think with our hands. But also, from the very beginning, we're embedding technology into the projects. So our students are studying Arduino, are studying coding, are studying interaction design, are using sensors and thinking of how machines interact with people. We have a simultaneous experimentation to bridge the physical and the digital. So of course we use all the new digital tools for generative design, but in combination with the traditional manufacturing tools. We experiment with different materials like balsa wood, plasticine, foam. But again, it is a constant back and forth between the digital and the physical since the beginning of their studies. All these projects are basically first-year projects. And we use the latest technology like 3D printing, like laser cutting. This is generative design where the software basically generates some forms that we can then translate to physical forms. Our students also learn to create virtual environments and to create, do game design and even virtual reality. And we use some of the latest manufacturing techniques. So we basically use laser cutting, CNC milling, 3D printing, and some of these additive manufacturing techniques, combined, of course, with traditional prototyping and model making techniques, where we use foam, wood, and traditional materials. These are some examples of 3D printed prototypes, and something that is probably a bit different from most design schools, which traditionally either focus towards the arts or focused towards the sciences and technology. We also encourage our students to develop and experiment with new materials. So this would normally be in the realm of material engineering, material sciences, or even chemistry. But we do believe that this is a very important information for designers. Now, in our studios where our students develop the main projects, we try to merge aesthetics, psychology, biology, material sciences, physics, and many other disciplines. So for example, from the first year, as some of the projects that you can see here, we ask our students to understand the human senses and the physiology, for example, of smelling or hearing, the relationship between those senses, and to develop some projects to affect those senses, either enhancing them or maybe reducing them. This one, for example, the idea is a porcupine, so creating a new type of sense that is inspired in some animals, and it's very tactile and very haptic. Or this one, which is basically based on physics. This project here was the idea to enhance vision, or basically transform human vision by the use of different mirrors that were very carefully calibrated to allow the user to view reality from many different points of view. Or this one, which could be related to medicine. This was a vest that the idea here was to be able to hear your own internal organs and to get in touch with your interior. We also constantly foster multidisciplinary dialogue and critique. The critiques are a tradition in design and architecture schools, and we always try to bring people from different backgrounds, both from industry and from academia, and from different design disciplines, service designers, graphic designers, architects, product designers, to be able to critique and have this dialogue around the projects of the students. And we also value process and failure as a means to achieve innovative outcomes. It's not so much about the final outcome, but it's really about all the process and experimentation to achieve these final outcome. We also foster national and international collaborations, and we also internally foster, again, as Hani was explaining, the cross-disciplinarity between the four different cross-concentrations. So here we have some examples of specifically of product design, fashion design, multimedia, which is where Renata works, and she's working very much around data, aesthetics, and artificial intelligence. And we also have strategic design management, which is very much about the management, but our aim is really to start seeing more projects which hybridize these skills and move a bit from the disciplinary silos. And we also continuously foster external collaborations, both with industry, government, and academia. So currently we're working with a medical university, the Mohammed bin Rashid University of Medical Sciences and Health Sciences. We're working with the government, with Dubai Court, looking at the law system. We're working with industries like Herman Miller, Audi, and Vitra. And we have different levels of design projects or different levels of realities, if we would want to speak in terms of the transdisciplinary manifestos that you have developed. So we have, for example, here collaborations with furniture manufacturers like Vitra and Herman Miller. This would be an example of a typical multidisciplinary approach. So in a Design for Health bootcamp, we would get students from the design disciplines and put them together to work with medical students and also with engineering students to together tackle local problems from the healthcare industry. We work with Expo 2020. Currently, we're designing costumes for the opera, also exhibitions in GITEX. And because we're very new and a very small university, we're also very agile. So around the pandemic, we immediately reacted with different projects. Some were basically continuing with the curriculum and just adapting some of the projects, but some also completely disrupted the curriculum, and we started initiatives like our Agile Factory or our remote fabrication lab. So basically what we want is to promote a transdisciplinary humanization of new technologies, and we want to encourage our students to understand the future applications and implications of design and technology within society, in a way, this triad that we're always looking at. And we also work a lot in bio-inspired and bio-enhanced design. So biology is also a very important component in our studies. If we try to talk about an ABC of what we do, it's about merging design with all the new different and emerging technologies like 3D printing, 4D printing, artificial intelligence, bioplastics, gamification, holograms, the Internet of Things, mechatronics, nanotechnology, personalized medicine, robotics, and so on. Now, I'll quickly, just to finalize, I'll show you also one of the courses that we teach, and this is one of the courses that actually I teach with Renata, and where she has put a very strong theoretical background around transdisciplinarity. And it's a course that is called Design Across Scales. And Design Across Scales is a course that is originally from MIT, and we're taking this course and we adapted it and we made it a theoretical course. The original course is based on a video by Charles and Ray Eames, who are pioneers in design from North America. And in the 1960s, they developed a video or a film, a movie called The Powers of 10, where they basically explore the scale of different elements from the human scale to the micro and nano scale, and then to the cosmic scale. And this difference of scales is what we try to explore in this course. So we start, for example, here, these are blogs where our students compile the 15 weeks of studies. And again, I want to remind you that these are all first-year students. So we start by trying to question what is design and what are the sensibilities around design. And we go into systems theory, because we believe this is very, very important to set a thinking basis. We look at texts by Donella Meadows, for example, Thinking in Systems. Then Renata's input is very much around elements, for example, of convergence and NBIC, nano, bio, cogno, info. We touch ideas around complexity, nature, and life, biosemiotics, synergistic design, or also seamless design, how we blend technology in everything that we do nowadays. This idea of seamlessness, especially applied to multimedia. And we also look very much into biology. So what we call life-oriented design, and we take classic examples like Wentworth Thompson's On Growth and Form, and we move towards biomimicry, and then we move towards biodesign. And finally, one of the main topics that we also discuss in this thread is, of course, the ideas around sustainability, which are very important nowadays. And I think with that, we have covered our 20 minutes. And I think Hani and I would be happy to answer any questions or well, yeah, participate in a discussion.
Thank you very much, Carlos.
If I can, have a question.
Yes, please.
First of all, congratulations for your very modern and inspiring presentation. You and my colleague Hani, you did. I'm an artist too, a teacher also, but in painting field. But I was really impressed by the actuality and modernity of your presentation and of the problems, issues you present here from your territory, very avant-garde problematics. The question in short should be, did you put some interest in the classic traditional issues that we used to study our generation? We are quite close. I mean, the classic literature, the classic philosophy, the ancient philosophy, to push it into your very futuristic way of understanding and promoting design for the future. This is the question.
So let me try to rephrase the question. Would the question be if, as a philosophical background for our design curriculum, we use classic philosophy or more contemporary philosophy? Is that the question?
Yes, quite like
Okay.
Okay.
If you are interested into that and you are interested to convert this kind of values into for resolving the very actual problems of design.
Mm-hmm.
Because I felt like you are very in touch with with our days, in nowadays, and the matters of the future, of the proximate time we have to pass, and the problems we used to interact now. But the question is exactly as you put it. If you consider that what we call past, everything we call past in this transdisciplinary point of view that we put all together is a useful, and you are planning to catch inspiration, especially maybe from the cultural space you live in.
Okay. So maybe I'll start by setting a bit of a background and just saying that the design disciplines are usually very practical and very applied. So I've taught in different countries in the world, in my country, Colombia, in Singapore, in Australia, and usually in 4-year or even 5-year degrees. Nowadays, you don't have much time to teach philosophy to the students. And probably the students that would be interested in philosophy are those that go for a PhD, for a doctorate, for these kind of postgraduate studies. So the amount of, or the theory that we can teach in some of these design courses is relatively limited. Just to set a bit of a background, and Hani may have a bit of a different opinion, probably from different educational backgrounds, but that has been a bit my experience. Having said that, I would say that while it would be desirable to understand, let's say, the history of philosophy, and I personally think that it's always important to understand the past to avoid making the same mistakes in the future. I would personally think that in our case, we're trying to look more into, let's say, the philosophy around the technologies of the future and our interaction with those technologies, rather than the more classical philosophical approaches. That would be my take. And Hani, I would love if you want to step in and maybe give a different point of view.
Yeah, it's not different, Carlos. It's basically reinforcing. If you want to measure how much theory our students get, they get about 40% theoretical courses versus 60% applied courses. And within the theory courses, there's an element of application. It's a really hands-on approach to learning. Now, when it comes to teaching them the theory, we do cover the classics in design only. We don't go into the classics in terms of literature or anything. So we look at Vitruvius, we understand Vitruvius, we understand the Renaissance in Italy, and then how, you know, it went from the Renaissance to the Sublime. We do cover all of that for them. At the same time, we don't teach it to them as if they are methods they need to apply today. So yes, we are guilty of being future-oriented, to the point where one student last year, she basically said, guys, it's just too much future, everything. Why don't you give us something, you know, more, you know, about the present or the past? So although we do encourage students to develop their own thesis and ideas, we tend to be future-oriented. And if you are in Dubai, you will understand more the context. It's very much thinking ahead.
I can imagine how it is.
Yeah. So.
May I continue the question about the future?
Sure, please.
So I am Peter Whitehouse. I work in design and innovation in Cleveland in the Weatherhead School of Management. My office is in a Frank Gehry building.
Oh, nice.
But I designed pedagogies. I look for patterns. In fact, for this conversation, I reviewed Christopher Alexander's pattern language. My specific project is I'm developing a transdisciplinary professor of the future at several universities, trying to endow that. But here's my question. There are many silos in academics, and you showed a picture and you talked about them. A huge silo, or a huge grand silo, is between the science and humanities. And Christopher Alexander got into some fights with other architects around what is the domination of the technology and the science in relationship to the humanities. So I liked your talk very much, very beautiful talk. Beauty, it was aesthetical. But what have you found about that huge boundary? My feeling is these transdisciplinary professors need to be at the level of the university, because we have to bring a lot of things together. So my question is, how have you found successfully to integrate the patterns of science and humanities?
Good question. I think Carlos showed how our curriculum brings in science, because designers tend to be afraid of science in the beginning, and yet we actually expose them and make them see that science and math can actually be visual exercises and systems thinking that can apply to them. So we don't shy away from science like most design schools. With the humanities, it is a natural connection, because everything that we do must have cultural impact. And so we definitely, in our curriculum, we may not consciously bridge between science and the humanities, but we make sure they infuse the work and the discourse that we have with the students. Now, coming back to Christopher Alexander, Peter, thanks for raising that. As an MIT product from the 80s, you know, he was the Bible at the time at MIT. And then when I went to Harvard, Harvard had totally rejected him. And I was puzzled because it was just a 180 degree. And architects tend to reject Christopher Alexander's work, especially from School of Harvard, thanks to the French thinkers. We are here with the French community, so Derrida, Foucault, and you know, all the semioticians and all of these, the deconstructivists, they totally ignored the work of Christopher Alexander. In architecture, we went into a more structuralist and semiotic thinking, which is very interesting. And then when I left architecture, went back into designing websites, all the UI, UX people were talking about Christopher Alexander and pattern languages. And I asked, currently he's the dean at MIT, but at the time he was a professor at Harvard, Hashim Sarkis, and I asked him, why is everyone talking about Christopher Alexander, but the architects have rejected him? And this was a question I asked him literally 22 years ago, and we still haven't been able to answer the question. Why has architecture completely rejected pattern languages and looking for patterns? And they even rejected Kevin Lynch, for that matter, who was finding urban patterns similar to Christopher Alexander. Anyway, so coming to that, it's very interesting that you bring Christopher Alexander, and definitely there are lots of things that we need to change in order to bring in pattern languages, pattern recognition into the students. We don't have the energy that Harvard has for Christopher Alexander, that's for sure. At the same time, I need to understand, why was he rejected and why is he coming back, but not in the field that he was supposedly influencing? It's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you. With so many French intellectuals on this call, I'd love to have some of them comment about some of those names that you mentioned.
Me too, yeah.
I mean, the separation between Anglo-British philosophy and continental philosophy, another huge divide that there's much to learn from.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let me put it this way. The Harvard Design School for the past 30 years has been following the French intellectual crowd and thinking, etc. Whereas MIT, until about 5 years ago, had totally rejected it. And to use their words, they thought it was stupid even to follow it. Just telling what MIT taught us, not what I believe. Yeah, maybe I'm provoking you a bit also to get the response.
I'm sorry, if just to continue, I mean, E.O. Wilson, speaking of Harvard, is also a player in this field. What do we mean by consilience? And in his view, I think it's a consilience that starts with science. It's imbalanced, out of balance. And the question is, how do we look for the bridging metaphors, not silos, but other metaphors that are more genuine about embracing the diversity of fields of knowledge for me? And I'll be quiet now.
Here I jump in, and I'm very familiar with E.O. Wilson, not only with the consilience and his idea of the unity of knowledge, but that has been critiqued because it has a very scientific approach still. But also with, I'm more interested in his idea of biophilia and biophilia theory, which basically says that inherently we as living organisms are attracted to nature. And this idea of biophilia has also been linked with biophilic design and all these merging of the natural and the artificial, which in a way is what we as designers are striving for nowadays. Now, I think that almost all the schools of design and innovation around the world are trying to get this balance, Peter, that you were talking about between the sciences and the arts. And probably one of the examples worldwide is this idea of the movement from STEM to STEAM. So STEM for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which is let's say the prevalent model in many countries, towards STEAM, where we add the A of the arts. Because in many countries, the arts and the humanities are neglected. And that's also part of the tradition of design. Design schools traditionally have been either part of art schools, art and design schools, and so they have a very art focus, or they have been part of technology schools. Now, nowadays, contemporary design education tries to build a triad similar to what you discuss in transdisciplinarity around science, technology, and society. Here, we talk about technology, society, and a human-centered approach, but also the business component, which is very important. So I think that's a question that many schools are asking, and I guess we're all experimenting with different ways of trying to bridge this dichotomy between the sciences and the humanities.
Maybe I can ask you a question, until someone has one. I had shown you, we had shown you the work of different students, and I had focused on the work of the student who upcycled denim, and she used product design techniques in fashion, and for her it was just a natural consequence. When you saw that, what were you thinking, and what can we do with it as a university to encourage this kind of cross-disciplinary practices?
Other question?
Yes, yes, that was the question, is how as a university can we capitalize on this students' natural ability to work across disciplines? What can we do to encourage that? What can we do to do more of that? Because I think we're going in that would be a good direction to go in for us.
So I have several thoughts. I work with young students, K-12, elementary school kids. Peter Senge used to say that kids have more natural systems thinking abilities than humans. So I think one is we try to inculcate educational programs at young ages to try to prevent the destruction of the natural beginner's mind thinking before we impose adult categories. And then at our university, we have a big maker space. You mentioned that you do this. I think you create spaces that give people access to tools and people that encourage that. So you create a practice space that allows that kind of thing to happen.
Interesting.
Thank you, Peter. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I would also like to pose a question to the audience. So we aim to develop a transdisciplinary design education, and that's our goal. But I was actually thinking today about it, and if if it is design education, in a way, it is defined within the discipline of design. So that would immediately make it not transdisciplinary because it becomes the domain of the discipline of design. So how would you think that that this works or could work for us, or would we have to call it something different that is not design or problem solving to really achieve this transdisciplinarity? What is your take on this?
Allow me, please, to say again my point of view, because I didn't explain very well first time. The idea was what you pointed now, you and your friend, in your last questions, is to pass over all borders to keep us, post-modernity, the today people, into doing only one thing and focus there. This is the idea of transdisciplinarity. So my proposal is to find the essence of knowledge, of all knowledge, and to find it, to catch it, and to compress it into some very good books and very good movies, documentaries, and everything, and to offer to the students. I'm also working with students, and I'm doing that for quite a long time, and I get some success because art and also design and any field are very full of politics and sometimes very subtle directions of doing things, and we can became very original if we catch this pure transdisciplinary. That means we have to catch in all four direction, great direction: philosophy, art, theology, and science too, without judging, without making preferences for, and without losing our duty as designers. You have to think for business and to think for utility of what you do, but being creative and being very original, for me, that means in the transdisciplinary spirit, if I express myself enough well.
Thank you, Christian.
But also, again, I appreciate the very high technological level. It is necessary, maybe first of all, to be like that in any field. To feel the spirit of the age, as Kandinsky said at the beginning of 20th century. A piece of art, and art, I mean everything that is very, very well done, is the child of the spirit of the age when it's done. So we have to catch, and our spirit is definitely high technology, digital, build, engineering, and all that stuff we know that is defining our age. But not only that, but catching this essence, this quintessentia of what happens, because we live in this time. We have the possibility to catch that through internet, to the great avalanche of books we have access, and this kind of dialogues, which is the incredibly beauty, especially in the time we live of this crisis we live with us. We can communicate, and I think it's great that.
Livin.
Yeah. Je peux parler en anglais ou en français?
À l'anglais, si vous avez la possibilité.
Ok, ça marche. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to congratulate you guys for what you did, because I find the idea is a really great one. Allow me to talk as a young graduated student. So I think I might give you a bit like a point of view of a student according to what you just present. For me, I'm a scientist. Like I used to do science since I'm in secondary school. What I think about this is if we want to make this so kind of like the design and the technology to come together, then it's a bit difficult if we are already in the university. The reason is when you get into the university, most of the time you already know what you want. I mean, like it's whether you already start to do design or you already start to do technology. So you don't really see like the use of do the two together, like to combine the two. Sorry for the English. So what I can suggest about this is maybe you can try to approach the secondary school also, because not directly like you build secondary school, but try to make kind of cooperation with secondary school, because I mean, I decided to be a scientist in the secondary school. And also it depends on the system, because first I start with the English system, and the English system is a bit different from the French system, because like you're learning, how can I say, like in French, if you want to be a scientist, then you just do science, right? But in English, you have the possibility to melt to kind of education. So I think one of the ideas that I can suggest would be maybe to try to make a kind of partnership with secondary school, and also make the student to see the impact of it. And also like young people today, I mean, most of the young people likes technology. Design is more like, people see like for art people, but I think like what you just present right now, if you present this kind of stuff to student from the secondary school, then I'm pretty sure he will really like it, because me too, I like it as a young graduate student. So I think like, yeah, maybe show this kind of idea in the secondary school, starting from the first year, for example. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Levine. That's a very nice comment and very good suggestion. And we actually do that. And also because, well, in the region, there's a very strong misconception around design. So Dubai, the UAE, is relatively a very young country, and there's not so many tradition of design as, for example, in Europe or other continents. So part of what we have to do is to approach high schools and even middle schools and primary schools and tell them what design is about, and tell them that design is not just a little drawing or something that is decorative or just the colors and textures, but that it's really about problem solving, that is really about being able to understand complex problems within their context and in terms of systems, and then being able to solve them. So yes, your suggestion is very valid, very true, and that's what we're doing. We even have a program called Project Design Space, which is basically training high school students around design thinking and innovation. So yes, we completely agree. It's very important for us.
Yeah, this program that Carlos mentioned, Project Design Space, started as a way to bring in real life problems to high schools to solve. So we bring companies from Dubai. So we've had Nike, Adidas, Lego, all these companies coming with a real problem and positing the problem for the high school students. And what we do, we train their teachers to think like designers, and then they apply it. In the first year, we had 50 students participate. This year, we had 5,000 students, high school students, participate in this event. So they're beginning to understand that designs actually, like Carlos said, a problem solving that engages science, and thank you for the suggestion to influence the humanities into it as well. This is something that we tend to neglect, but we need to bring it back. So great suggestions.
Okay, Samuel, do you have a question?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. And my question to you is in the sense of how the students at the DIDI Institute, they face or they respond to ethical issues concerning the technological problems? Do they look for a transdisciplinary response to the ethical problems?
Yes, very good question. Hani, you want to start?
I was hoping you would start on that one. But
okay, maybe, no problem.
Yeah, but let me just put a foundation, and then you can. Thank you, Samuel. This is a very important question, and it's the question that keeps us up at night a lot. How do we teach them the ethical practices in there? We actually keep up with the literature as much as possible. It's very much built in our DNA to have the care, the C is very important. In our fashion program, for instance, the head of the fashion program, she comes from ethical fashion. We handpicked her because that's her specialty, because in fashion there's a lot of issues. Now, coming to tech, I would assume there's a lot of issues with AI, and I wish Hinata was here because this would be her line of thought and argument. We are very, very conscious, very sensitive to that, especially in a region when, you know, we have to be super, what's the word I'm looking for? Super vigilant, super careful, because the values here are very different from Europe. And we all come from a European-centric, and it became more obvious when I started teaching. I'll give you an example. For instance, when we discussed the issue of the objectifying of women in media, I went to Kinokuniya, which is a huge Japanese but locally based bookshop. And I went through all their magazines looking for ads where they objectify women, just to make sure the students have an example. And probably the salespeople thought I was a pervert in the. I could not find a single issue of magazines, including, you know, the Elle and the Vogue, and where women are objectified. Like I was looking for the Dolce Gabbana, for instance, ad that has the woman completely laid in her bathing suit with men standing up over her, dominating her. Doesn't exist. There's no objectification of women in media in this part, in Dubai in particular. How they managed to do that, I don't know. But I do raise that as an issue. And the students are shocked to see how women's bodies are objectified in Western media. And that to me was interesting. So I feel we have a lot of learning to do as well when it comes to ethical practices. This doesn't answer the technology question. Here, you know, I mean, the way they handled COVID is exemplary, I think, but I would leave with this foundation to give Carlos some room to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hani. So yes, definitely the cultural context here in Dubai and being in a Muslim country does pose a very specific context for some of these issues, especially related to gender and some other items. But in relation to Samuel's question around technology, yes, one of our main aims is to get our students to question the ethics of technology. So for example, with Renata recently precisely wrote a paper around the dark side of data. And we've been trying to think what's happening with all the data that Facebook is collecting, or that WhatsApp is collecting, or that even governments are collecting. So what are the ethics around all that data collection, and is there a dark side around it? In the first year studios, we look at future technologies, for example, the production of artificial meat, or even the idea of electronic tattoos and electronic implants in people. And we ask our students to try to understand the potential applications, but also the potential implications of how we use those technologies. because of course we know that while technologies have many positive sides, they can also have very negative sides and very negative uses. So this idea around the ethics of the technologies, of the new technologies, is something that we work a lot, especially in our theoretical courses. Does this answer your question, or were you thinking in something else?
Yes, thank you very much for talking about this, but I was also thinking more directly in a concrete study from some student, how if they maybe could find some cross-field ways to answer ethical problems from technological of our time today. It was more in this sense, but
yeah,
thank you very much.
Yeah, I think the focus has been mostly on empathetic solutions. So they work with a lot of physically challenged solutions, like for blind people or deaf people or impaired or handicapped people. So the focus of the students seems their heart goes towards what they call here in this country people of determination, people with challenges, and how to help them overcome them. So it hasn't been so much about surveillance or things related to technological ethics as much as using technology for empathetic solutions. And they find that ethical in a way that they're using their talent to solve complex problems for people in need. That seems to be more the trend with the students.
Other question? It's finished?
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And we hope this triggers some new ideas. And of course, we hope that we represented Renata well. I think she's been linked to your research group for many years, and she was the main motor of this talk, and she really wanted to share with all of you some of the work she has done in our school. But again, it's very unfortunate that she's sick and that she couldn't participate today. But thank you very much for inviting us, and
thank you very
much for your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Carlos and Annie. And from what I understood, I discovered an original use of using transdisciplinarity. And it was very, very interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
À la prochaine.
À la prochaine.
See you.
Okay.
Ce
Bye.
sera donc fin.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Merci à tous.
Hasta luego.
Adiós. Bye.
Adiós.
Adiós.
Bye.
Cuídense mucho.
Sí.
Take care. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Yes.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.